most of the people around the globe still wonder, who truly built the Great Pyramids of Egypt? What was its real purpose? From what history tells us, the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built around 2550 BC. Mainly, the pyramids were the tombs of the pharaohs of Egypt. Pharaohs were mummified with amulets and jewels inside the linen wrappings and then buried in lots of coffins inside coffins to protect the body, later to be placed inside a prepared room in the pyramid. It's long been a common belief that the pyramids were built by the slaves. That's what the Greek historian Herodotus claimed when he visited Egypt 2,000 years after the pyramids had been completed. And it's a view that has persisted right through to Hollywood. But that belief was to be shattered by a series of extraordinary discoveries which began in the late 20th century. The theory of the archaeologists suggests that the pyramids were built by the ancient Egyptians under the pharaoh's order. Others suggest that they are the remains of the ancient civilization, or they were built with the help of aliens. In this video, we are going to look at a specific kingdom that happened to be closer to the Egyptians and also used to build pyramids very similar to those of Egypt. Many people only knows about the 3 famous pyramids of Egypt. But what if I told you that there are more than 1,000 pyramids in Northeast Africa? And the majority of them are in Sudan. The Kingdom of Kush. Kush in northern Sudan is one of the forgotten kingdoms of Africa and the ancient world. The kings of Kush reached the zenith of their power in the 8th century BC, when they conquered their neighbor Egypt. And their influence extended as far as the modern-day Middle East. The Kingdom of Kush emerged from the ancient civilization of Kerma around 2500 BC. Kerma, located along the Nile River, was characterized by its advanced urban centers, skilled craftsmanship, and extensive trade networks. Both kingdoms were hostile and complementary, and over the centuries the balance of power would shift from one to the other. In the writing of history, mostly by the Western scholars, the importance of ancient Sudan was rather overlooked. They always thought of Kerma as it was always copying Egypt. Kerma was a very advanced state. Its civilization predated Babylon, Rome, and Greece. Means that the exchange of ideas went both ways, not just being a receiver from Egypt. By 1500 BC, Egypt began to exert influence over the region, leading to a period of Egyptian domination. During the New Kingdom period of Egypt around 1550 to 1070 BC, Kush was firmly under Egyptian control, with Egyptian governors ruling the territory. However, by the end of the New Kingdom, Kush began to assert its independence and emerged as a significant power in its own right. The first capital of the independent Kingdom of Kush was Napata, situated near the 4th cataract of the Nile. By the early 8th century BC, ancient Egypt's fighting capability was much diminished. The kingdom had grown weak and couldn't ward off the invaders. Egypt came under the rule of princes from Libya who had their own traditions and religion and had no regard whatsoever for those of the Egyptians. This was a source of great dismay for the Kushites. Through the centuries of interaction, the Kushites had religion and culture similar to those of ancient Egyptians. By 750 BC, the Kushites had had enough of the decadence of the Libyan princes and their allies in Egypt. At that time, Kush was ruled by a king called Kashta, and he believed it was his duty to save Egyptians from further ruin. From there, he decided to invade Egypt. Kashta's army was known for the skill of its horsemanship, and they were very fierce archers. They would dip their arrows in poison to make it more deadly, and their specialty was to shoot their opponents in the eye. Kashta's army first took Thebes, the religious capital of Egypt. For the most part, Kushites were welcomed by the Egyptians, grateful that their co-religionists were fighting off the Libyans. With Thebes secured, Kashta opened the doors for his successors to follow his footsteps and continue to rule Egypt. Kushite kings expanded their influence northward into Egypt, ruling as the 25th dynasty of Egypt for almost 100 years from 747 to 656 BC, with 5 kings from Kush ruling the kingdom. This period saw a blending of Egyptian and Nubian cultures. Kush had adopted most of Kerma's culture and used to build their own type of pyramids, where they also used to bury their kings and queens. The Kushites' pyramids differ from those of Egypt. They are smaller, steeper, and made of red sandstone. There are 1,000 pyramids that have been discovered in Sudan, and over 300 still standing. In Egypt, there are about 100 pyramids. And you wonder why less people knows about the Sudanese pyramids, and also Sudanese pyramids receive fewer thousands of tourists per year. Is there a real reason for this, or is it that Sudan doesn't promote its history? Or due to the political instability that has been around in Sudan for many years, prevents people from visiting one of the best wonders of the world? In the 7th century BC, the Assyrians, under King Esarhaddon, invaded and conquered much of Kush, including Napata. Despite Assyrian rule, Kush maintained some degree of autonomy and continued to participate in regional trade networks. However, the Assyrian conquest weakened Kush, leading to its decline as a major power in the region. Around the 4th century BC, the capital of Kush shifted southward to Meroe, near the 6th cataract of the Nile. This marked the beginning of the Meroitic period around 4th century BC to 4th century CE. The Meroitic period is characterized by the development of the Meroitic script, an indigenous writing system. Also, this period saw the flourishing of Meroitic art and architecture. Kush continued to engage in trade with Egypt, the Mediterranean world, and other African kingdoms, exporting goods such as iron, ivory, and gold. The ironwork in Meroe can be compared to the Industrial Revolution in Western countries around the 18th century. The abundance of iron ore led to the working of iron. People began to farm, and Meroe became a central point for commerce. The Kushites also built their pyramids that would also serve as tombs for their kings and queens. But it wasn't until the 3rd century BC that the kings and queens were buried there. The Kushites built there some of the finest tombs and pyramids, and the tips of the pyramids were made in gold, but they were ripped and plundered by the Western archaeologists. The kings and queens were both buried with luxury jewels and other belongings, but they were also ruined and stolen by Westerners. They built temples, palaces, and other monuments. But few of them were preserved from being ruined. To this day, few of the buildings still stands due to lack of maintenance and protection. Now, let us dive into the matter of why does the pyramids of Sudan not mentioned much as the Egyptian ones? Even in the history books of Africa, they are never spoken about. The majority of the Sudan natives don't have much knowledge on their ancestors' history. Most of this outcome is based on the history of Africa always being written by non-Africans, and they always leave most of the critical moments in the history of Africa. This is why Africans to this day have less knowledge about its history, from its ancient religion, architecture, and other practices from the past. It is time that the true history comes out and deletes the narratives of the West that always hides most of the rich history of Africa, to avoid the Africans to know more about their true self. This benefits the Western by keeping Africans ignorant and taking advantage of them. Remember, whoever controls the past controls the future.